Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Wednesday, January 29th, and this is Aragon Live, our weekly video podcast. With me today, I've got Ken Delaney, Adam Pease, Betsy Burton, and yours truly, Jim Lundy. We've been doing these Aragon Live podcasts for about 10 years. Honestly, started them in 2014, and now we're making them available to everyone just to show off all the great instant analysis we've been doing for a long time for our clients, and now basically make it available to the rest of you. So, okay, first of all, we did a special podcast on Monday, Adam and I talking about DeepSeek, kind of calling this like a DeepSeek overreaction. So let's kind of dive in. Couple factoids. They did download massive amounts of data from OpenAI. That's going to come out, but they have data that shows that there were massive downloads using the OpenAI APIs. There's also speculation that they used a lot of NVIDIA GPUs, maybe rented them for a short period of time. Did they really get access to 30 to 50,000? And then did they compress it? There's new things about daisy chaining algorithms. So they not only did reinforcement learning, which we've been talking about for a couple of years, where they don't use like a million pieces of data, they might use 70 million. So you can predict something might happen. And then they also trained it on logic. So you now have a reasoning engine. So a couple of nice innovation things. Sam Altman was very complimentary of them. However, we have to be aware that, imitation is the best form of flattery. And that's what they did. So team, let's talk about the market overreacted. Now it's kind of being corrected. But I think the good news out of this, even though NVIDIA announced a desktop GPU machine first, you can run the DeepSeek thing on an M4 MacBook with 48 gigs of memory, which is pretty impressive. Commentary from the team.
I think what we're going to see here is kind of the discussion we've often had between traditional computing and quantum computing. I mean, the general populace thought that quantum computing was the next generation of all computing. And we saw that, no, it's particularly good at particular types of problems. I think the key thing that I've read about what DeepSeek does is distillation of information into a logic model, right? Reasoning model. And what they're going to be able to do is sort of take the knowledge of mankind, focus it on a particular problem, distill it down so it runs on lower power processors. So think about the driverless car. There's information to be gleaned about that. It'll be distilled down to a reasoning model, which will be put in your car, be much more efficient, etc. It's like what the human brain does. Sometimes we make decisions based on reading lots of books and analyzing lots of information. On the other hand, some of the Greek philosophers did a lot of their great work based on logic, right? So I think we just have different ways of looking at AI models, and they'll all make sense. Good news is that we have open source. We're able to look at this in detail and determine more about it. But I think already many of the technologists have published some works on YouTube that really have distilled this down into what it really is. And we should also remember that, Adam, maybe you want to comment on this for the test that you've looked at. There is some political bias put into these things, and they don't answer questions in this sort of uncompromised way that a lot of U.S. models do. So we should all be aware of that.
Yeah, there were, reports of it not answering controversial questions about Chinese political history that, are kind of difficult to ask within China. And so obviously that's a huge concern for even people working with this model open source, because you have to wonder what kind of guardrails were kind of implemented in training. And I think that it's still great technology, but everyone should be aware that all the choices that these companies make when they train these models have the potential to be biased choices that just reflect a certain set of interests. And I think we saw a very, very kind of embarrassing and naked example of that with DeepSeek refusing to answer questions about Tiananmen Square.
To me, it's kind of interesting to think about this in light of some of the stuff that's going on with TikTok. And I don't want to go backwards on that one, but there are a lot of ethical and legal and government decisions to be made with respect to leveraging technology that comes from other countries, including China, Russia, Iran, other places.
Yeah. So this is all good. I mean, we're basically, competition. People are rethinking what they're doing. Is it going to cost what it's going to cost? Most of the consensus I've seen today is they're still going to build lots of data centers. They need lots of power. So that those vectors have not seemed to have changed based on what I'm seeing from the market.
So yeah, we're gonna talk about, it's all great in the next item on compromised LLMs, but Adam, they did announce a new vision model. Can you talk about Janus Pro?
Yeah, so this is another way that DeepSeek has kind of made a name for itself. Is they immediately on the heels of this release, they came out with a image generation model, and it's apparently better than the existing OpenAI model, which admittedly image generation is not really OpenAI's focus, and it's more of a side project for them. But it's not a good look in either case. So I think this is just adding to the insult to injury for OpenAI.
How does it compete against Google's Imagen 3? Is there any comment on that?
I haven't seen people do direct comparisons, but I suspect it might be better than that too, because I don't think that one's much better than DALL-E 3.
I've used Imagen 3 to do a couple things at home, and I thought it was quite good.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll see a comparison emerge then. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, so we're going to talk about something we talked about last week. We're going to bring it up, and the issue is compromised LLMs because of the data sources they used. And Meta, as we talked about last week, is facing a lawsuit on using Library Genesis, which is a dark web collection of a massive collection of pirated works, including books, movies, music, but a lot of books, a lot of textbooks with a lot of facts. And we think, so basically, if you use maybe Oracle using Llama 3, that means customers use that and then use it to generate new information, like new text, that could be basically, they could be sued for copyright infringement. People generally settle copyright infringement cases. Facebook Meta is arguing fair use. You can't say fair use for an entire book, right? Mm-hmm. That's already been proven in court. Fair use is a couple paragraphs. It's not an entire book. That's theft. So OpenAI strongly rumored to have done that. And as you know, somebody committed suicide in San Francisco. That was an OpenAI employee. And the parents are very upset because it was a Bay Area kid from Cupertino. And the parents say that he didn't do it. So that's being investigated. The only one that hasn't come up, Bedrock has not been mentioned. Amazon AWS Bedrock and Google has not been mentioned as far as doing that. However, the warning to enterprises is you must be indemnified by your LLM provider. You must have an indemnification clause in your master service agreement before you let your users or your customers use that LLM. And it's very important that you do that, because right now, I mean, companies like Reuters that have pictures are going after people with attorneys saying you used our image without permission, you owe us $1,000, right, for one image. So I think that's the risk, is you have to have clean data sources, and there's even rumors about NVIDIA having done some of that. So it was a wild west, and now to point of the overreaction, there's going to be a pivot back to say you must have clean data, you must license that content, and that's what will probably happen. These people will have to go and cut a deal with publishers to say we're cutting a deal, and then they're clean. That's the easiest way out rather than litigation.
Jim, I want to bring everybody back to over a year ago when we talked about when there was all this hype about ChatGPT and OpenAI. And we came out in one of these sessions and said, don't count Google out, because at the time they were, they're way behind, et cetera. Because remember, Google has all this original content they've collected over the years. And I think, that still is their big, ace in the hole, I think.
Okay, so Betsy, talk about the Oracle Starlink.
So Oracle and Starlink have announced a partnership, and I'm always, whenever I hear partnership, I'm sort of like, what does that actually mean? There was no news as to, any financial exchange. There could be some joint, funding between the two organizations. That's all unknown at this point. But basically what it is it's for people that are using Oracle Cloud infrastructure in remote areas. You have this partnership with Starlink so that you can just get a Starlink connection. That's kind of how it's being positioned right now. But I think it's more interesting than that. So to me, what's interesting about this is a way for Starlink to be able to show and demonstrate that they're viable for enterprise applications, with someone like Oracle, which is helpful for them. And it's also an opportunity for Oracle, to partner with Starlink, not just for remote locations, but also other ones. So, in my mind, this is probably being used as a test bed for Oracle, being able to run with something like Starlink and not be connected, not to be dependent upon other networks. And so I think it's interesting. To me, this is a test run of this partnership, talking about remote locations, but I think it's going to have a broader impact than just remote locations.
Betsy, I can add a couple things here.
Yeah.
Number one, Starlink is in the process of upgrading their network to have better performance. They just launched this Starship that blew up, unfortunately, and it had some of the more advanced Starlinks in there. So unfortunately, those were lost. The other thing is Jeff Bezos, you probably read, his New Glenn rocket finally was successful, and he's planning to use that to create a competitor to Starlink. So, Starlink's probably trying to sign up these partnerships before, New Glenn gets, Amazon gets much of a network up there.
Yeah, probably. So I also think it's interesting that this was announced right after the recent Stargate announcement, which includes, both Musk and Larry Ellison and everyone else all together. So I think the timing of this was kind of interesting as well. But
by the way, the T-Mobile had another great quarter. They were on CNBC today on Squawk, and they were talking about T-Mobile now connecting with Starlink, particularly in LA, where they basically opened that up. So I do think that, and they talked about the number of satellites, and basically, T-Mobile endorsed Starlink.
Yeah.
Apple is also making it easier, but T-Mobile totally endorsed Starlink as another way forward. They didn't talk about price, but they did talk about price. That some of it's going to be bundled into a subscription, certain type of subscription. You get Starlink.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
I will share with you guys, where I live, out in the middle of nowhere. I see Starlink launches on a really regular basis. I mean, we can see them going up on a really regular basis. It looks like an alien going up.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely, we see them on a fairly regular basis. So they're shooting these up.
That's from Vandenberg.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk about the rise of the digital worker. Ken, Adam, you want to talk about Operator?
Yeah, I can talk about Operator. So OpenAI has released basically a tool that allows AI models to basically scan websites, kind of like Selenium or Puppeteer or one of these tools that you can use to orchestrate web scraping, but the AI can actually click around and make decisions and visualize what's on the web page. And so it's a little bit different from the last generation of kind of code scraping tools that we're used to. And so it's kind of one step towards using tools, interacting with the web in a more human-like way and possessing more agency. So while we can't kind of build, fully autonomous agents that go out and try and solve problems on their own, the way a human on the web would, I think we're getting closer to that. And what they have shown that we can do is do things like, fill out an Amazon cart, fill out a virtual shopping cart, these kinds of activities that I think are clearly really important to get online in order to automate industry. And so, it's an interesting tool. I don't think that it's, probably even 50% to where it's going to be in a couple years, because this is a newer side of things, but it's definitely a movement in the direction of agency and virtual workers.
So I think it's interesting to see what the description says. it says operator relies on a computer using agent model that combines GPT-4's vision capabilities with advanced reasoning through reinforcement learning, right? And this was said before, all this DeepSeek stuff, to be able to interact with interfaces. They can basically see through these screenshots and actually, decompose them and interact with them. So I think reasoning is the new buzzword in 2025, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So a little bit of security stuff. So LinkedIn, Adam.
Oh yeah, so this is a interesting story. LinkedIn is getting sued now because people are alleging that they used user messages, like private messages between users, as training data for their LLMs, and so they're suing them, seeking like 1,000 in damages per person, and LinkedIn is denying it. I don't know how much more we can really say now, other than I think that probably most of us are suspicious that these companies are using our personal data to train these models.
Sure.
And I'm sorry?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm not surprised by this. Are you?
Yeah. I'm not, no. And I think that, yeah, it's hopefully we get more awareness around this issue, so there can be some kind of reckoning for these companies that are using data that I think their users often would assume is private data, even if
the irony here, all they have to do is just ask, say, can we use your data? Most people say fine, right?
Yeah.
They didn't, and that's a problem.
So I wrote a blog last week on LinkedIn about how LinkedIn is changing their model from being primarily ad-based to primarily subscription-based. So they're changing their whole entire business model so that they're going to be much more of like a regular software company. So to me, this isn't I would have assumed that anything I typed into LinkedIn was going to be, potentially used by them. And you're right, Ken, it was naive of people to not recognize that, and they could have easily asked. But to me, this fits in well with their shift towards being a subscription company, because what they want to do is they want to offer AI technologies on top of all of their data, probably including internal messages, to help job seekers and recruiters and everyone else get information about people. So it fits in well with that move towards AI-based software company.
Claude, Adam?
Yeah, so Claude, has, and this isn't really, a breaking news so much as commenting on stuff that Dario Amodei, their CEO of Anthropic, has been saying in the wake of kind of DeepSeek and O1, and Anthropic hasn't really had a major update, in terms of a major model update since Claude Sonnet 3.5, which has been almost out for like a year now, I think. And so I think that people are kind of looking to them and saying, okay, well, when are you going to catch up? What are you going to do next? And he did suggest that they are moving in the direction of sort of more reasoning oriented stuff, presumably to compete with OpenAI and DeepSeek. And so I think we can expect more from them in that field. I will say though, that Claude really holds up as far as LLMs go. It has been out for a while, but I think people still consistently turn to it for many tasks over ChatGPT or the other ones, now DeepSeek, Gemini. So I think Anthropic's doing good, but I am excited to see what comes next from them, because it's been a while since they've released a model.
So look, there's a lot of going on in cyber war, besides people kind of stealing, data from generative AI companies like we talked about before. The Smiths Group, which is a big, IoT provider that operates basically in aerospace and energy and other markets. They were cyber attacked, and they're still trying to understand it. But this is a repeating pattern where companies do not have the right infrastructure to stop attacks, and they're going after infrastructure. So aerospace, energy, prime targets. When I say energy, gas, water, oil, nuclear. So whether it's a ransomware or not, it's still continuing unabated. It's massive, and companies really need to step up their efforts to, make it harder for people to kind of get in. And they're trying every other way. By the way, lots of backdoors through partner apps, through APIs. It's really hard to lock this stuff down, but you know, there are ways to do it. So, we kind of talked about this. So Twilio's had a nice bump in stock price, up 20%. As you know, they're a provider of communication APIs, a lot of both email and SMS or texting. We think there's going to be increased demand for omni-channel communications for both humans, for apps, and now for digital workers. Digital workers will need to reach out, communicate. They'll want to use APIs. So, you know, kind of a nice rebound. I wouldn't say that Twilio's done great in video APIs or voice, but they've done well with SMS. They bought an email company a couple years ago, very solid. SendGrid, very solid. So I'd expect to see more of that. So we covered a lot of ground today.
Mhm.
You know, obviously we're going to be continuing to write about this, but I think one of the big takeaways is you need to have SLAs, service level agreements, in place, to have indemnification clauses in place to protect your information so that people don't come after you. You should pressure providers of LLMs to make sure that they have rights to the content that they trained on. That's the big takeaway here, folks. Aragon Live, January 29th. Thanks, team. And we'll have this recording up on our YouTube channel. Thanks, team.
Thanks.
Thanks.